film also talks about Wall Street, or in Canada, we call it Bay Street, the algorithmic game, finding people who would take a subprime mortgage, then betting against their failure, then foreclosing on them. And, we know that, the 2008, 2009 financial crisis was the single largest, destroyer of wealth in Black families, in history. So data science punishes the poor and elevates the rich is sort of the argument that's being made in the film. Who's competing for the eyeballs of the poor? Those at, colleges you mentioned, payday lenders, gambling. So people are suffering algorithmic harm, and there is right now no appeal system. There's no accountability. So can you say more? And this is maybe where I'm asking you to speculate as a quote expert, as opposed to as a filmmaker. So you can punt on this one, but can you say more about what, based on your making of the film, what accountability would look like given this kind of asymmetry of power?
Yes. I mean, I tend to think of legislation. My mantra is sort of like, don't leave the tech bros alone on this stuff. I think that there is an inclusion crisis in the tech industry, both in terms of gender of AI researchers being 14%, which is abysmal, and people of color I couldn't even find stats on. And I think more people need to be in the room. And I also think more ethicists and outside auditors need to be in the room for these algorithmic systems. But I don't think it should be up to the technology companies. I think that I'm sort of fascinated by Kathy O'Neill's idea of an FDA, of having a system that sets a certain standards of practices for algorithms, for which they have to be vetted before they get deployed at scale. The idea that 3 Black women grad students figured out that facial recognition technology that was being deployed by the FBI, ICE, and police departments here in the US was racially biased and failed more often than not, especially on women of color. And then and then somehow without legislation end up being deployed and in the communities that they fail on the most. What could go wrong? Exactly. Right. So I think that we actually need legislation. And then I'm so grateful to the Institute and to your university for hosting this conversation, because we have this massive education gap. And I know that knowledge is power. And, these predatory systems often prey on people not knowing how they work. And so I think that us having some basic knowledge about how these systems work is really essential. So I hope that you'll continue to talk about this with your colleagues and at your dinner tables, so that we can empower ourselves and then in turn put pressure on legislators to hold these companies accountable.